Yeah.
About halfway through Blade Runner, I realized I stopped caring about the people in the movie. I was interested mostly in the special effects. It's a great movie to look at, but a hard one to care about. I didn't appreciate the predictable story, the standard characters, the cliffhanging cliches, but I do think the special effects make Blade Runner worth going to see.
I agree with part of your review. Predictable, cliches.
What about the special effects?
Dazzling for the first 20 minutes, and then what?
When it was released in June 1982, Blade Runner failed to impress both critics and audiences. It didn't receive much praise apart from its visual effects, and it barely made a profit. 4 decades and a couple of re-releases later, Blade Runner has been reassessed. It's become a critical darling, a classic of the genre, an influential masterpiece, a franchise starter, and, coincidentally, one of my most favorite movies. But even as a Blade Runner fanboy, I can't help but notice one thing. Even with its renewed popularity, critics rarely cite the story, or rather the screenplay, as one of the film's strong suits. At best, people are obsessed with analyzing whether lead character Deckard is human or not, which largely depends on which version you're watching. Or they quote some of the film's famous lines. But looking at it purely from a story perspective, does Blade Runner make any sense? There's something that's always bothered me about its basic premise. There are special cops called Blade Runners who are tasked with the dangerous job of hunting down replicants. What are those and why is it dangerous?
Replicants are like any other machine. They're either a benefit or a hazard.
Despite Deckard's cynical words, and despite the title of Blade Runner's source novel, replicants are neither machines nor androids. They don't seem to have any mechanical parts at all, but rather they are genetically engineered and made of flesh and bones. It's probably easiest to think of replicants as clones. They are made by the Tyrell Corporation, though the film doesn't go into much detail on how they are actually manufactured. One would assume they are grown in a lab, maybe in some vats, or, as Blade Runner 2049 envisions it, in sacks of amniotic fluid. This man is a genetic engineer specializing in eyes, which he grows in goo in his shop, and he's a supplier for Tyrell.
You Nexus, huh? I design your eyes.
It's doubtful that he actually supplies eyeballs which are implanted into eyeless bodies, so what he probably means is that he supplies Tyrell with genetic codes for good eyes. In any case, it's clear that Tyrell Corporation is very good at replicating the human form, because their Nexus 6 model is virtually indistinguishable from humans.
Commerce is our goal here at Tyrell. More human than human is our motto.
Some are made to be stronger, smarter, dumber, or submissive, depending on their intended purpose. Replicants are slave labor, meant to be a workforce on off-world colonies, or to be soldiers, or to be sex toys. But whatever their purpose may be, they are always exactly like people, which makes detecting them very hard. But why is that?
We began to recognize in them strange obsession. After all, they are emotionally inexperienced with only a few years in which to store up the experiences which you and I take for granted.
Replicants have limited lifespans, and thus their emotional development is stilted. Blade Runners exploit this, and they detect replicants using the Voight-Kampf Test, or VK for short. It's an empathy test, kind of like a Turing test where questions are meant to elicit an emotional response, or lack thereof. A Blade Runner sits across a potential replicant, reads off questions from a predetermined list,
in answer to your query, they're written down for me,
and watches his subject's pupils using the machine's magnification. This test, however, doesn't make any sense. It's completely impractical and dangerous for the one administering it, as the opening scene clearly shows. Why would a replicant just sit around and let itself be tested and willingly detected? And, more importantly, why is this even necessary? Why do replicants need to be detected in the first place? Replicants are products of the Tyrell Corporation. Their identities shouldn't be a mystery. They are not some clandestine underground force. Files clearly exist on each of the replicants, and surely Tyrell Corp know what they made, right? Detecting a replicant should be as easy as looking up a product in a database. A replicant escaped? Here's its photo, fingerprints, serial number, and shoe size. Why should a complicated and time-consuming empathy test be needed? Also, why don't they just brand the replicants in one of numerous easy ways? The dystopian sci-fi standard is a barcode on the back of the neck. Different models in the sequel have codes in their eyes. Animals are genetically replicated in this world too, and it's possible to brand them on a cellular level. While it would be impractical for a Blade Runner to run around with a microscope testing potential replicants' skin cells, perhaps a quicker scanning device or even a fast blood test could do the trick. There's simply no reason for the VK test, nor for replicant detection, to even be a thing. And that leads us to the idea that being a Blade Runner is a dangerous job. Yes, it's dangerous if you have to sit across the table from your target and give them a pop psychology quiz while staring at their eyes. It wouldn't be dangerous if they just looked into Tyrell's product catalog to see what the replicants look like. Yes, it's dangerous if you approach them pretending to be some ridiculous peephole inspector. It wouldn't be dangerous if instead you use the element of surprise, since you already know where your target is. Yes, it's dangerous if you go hunt a replicant you know is designed for combat all alone with no backup. It wouldn't be dangerous if you went in with a SWAT team. Instead, when Deckard is approached by the police right before he goes after the replicants, he inexplicably shoos them away. But why do that? Because Blade Runner is a noir detective story that just happens to be set in the far distant future of 2019. At its heart, the film is about a hard-boiled loner in a trench coat who tracks down vague clues and beds a pretty damsel. He's not going to call for backup because that's not the vibe of the genre. And the VK test is a vehicle to explore what it means to be human. It contrasts the stoic, emotionless human with the replicants brimming with life. It confronts us with fundamental questions. If it looks like a human, emotes like a human, and it has human memories, is it human? Why not? Blade Runner compensates its illogical elements and plot holes with philosophy and emotion. And that's why it still continues to fascinate 43 years later. It's an empathy test of the viewer. It doesn't need to make any sense. Thank you for watching, and if you liked the video, please hit subscribe.